During my reread of Black Clover's dungeon arc, I couldn't help but remember what the arc did for me. If someone were to ask me when Black Clover begins to get good, I'd tell them the dungeon arc. I think it was for many, the arc that made people stick through with the series. I know it was for me. Yes, we did have a small arc prior to it, the Saucy Village arc, but that was very short and basic. The manga was new and still getting its feet wet. As a result, the Saucy Village arc still felt loosely similar to some other prominent shonen series. Black Clover really hadn't come into its own yet. But then we got the dungeon arc, which was also fairly short, spanning just 10 chapters. And obviously, the arc was nothing groundbreaking. It still lacked the complexity of future arcs. Even so, it managed to feel like the first real arc of Black Clover, only blatantly borrowing from Magi's dungeon concept. At least that's the way I see it, and I found that refreshing. So in this video, I'll have a look back on this arc, analyzing the theme of teamwork and just generally reminiscing on the arc that really started it all. Part of what makes the dungeon arc a good entry to Black Clover is the presence of a cohesive and clear theme throughout. And the theme for this arc is undoubtedly teamwork. That's what the arc truly was all about. We primarily saw this with Luck, who was seamlessly introduced in this arc while tagging along with Asta and Noelle. Turns out, he didn't enjoy working as a team. He felt that he needed to achieve success on his own in order to continue to make his mother happy. This translates well into the Lotus fight. Luck and Lotus had an interesting dynamic. Their fight initiates with Luck taking down some of the fodder that Lotus brought along with him. While Luck is doing that, Lotus had already cast a spell that fatigued Luck. Lotus tells him that teamwork is essential, but of course, due to his past, Luck is blinded to this, at least until Asta arrives and convinces him to fight as a team. At this point, they were put in a situation that I've always felt is reminiscent of the Jirobo fight during part 1 of Naruto. This is the part of the fight where teamwork really came into play, and Luck's cooperation with Asta and Noelle was rewarded. It was a situation where Luck would have certainly lost if he hadn't had a team to help him. On the other hand, Lotus had a flawed idea of what teamwork was. He thought of his teammates as underlings and easily allowed them to be sacrificed. He says that their sacrifice wasn't in vain since they allowed him to use the fatigue spell, and he tells Luck how important that is, that it's all about teamwork. But you could say that Lotus lost this fight due to his distorted perception of what teamwork really is. Instead of allowing his teammates to be wiped out by Luck at the beginning of the fight, he could have fought alongside them. But that's really why Lotus lost and why this fight encapsulates the value of teamwork. And the slight depth that this fight has is part of why I enjoy this arc so much. It was a great way of introducing and giving Luck some immediate progression as a character. But Tabata also found a good antagonist in Lotus. He gave us our first bit of info on the Diamond Kingdom, and also mentioned a few interesting things about how he fought Julius and Yami in the past. All in all, it was a great fight, and while this is the primary and most obvious way that the theme of teamwork is explored throughout this arc, we also see it in other areas. One of them being Mars. It seems that while Lotus at least valued teamwork in his distorted way, Mars, like Luck, preferred to do things all on his own. Mars didn't actually talk a whole lot in this arc, but he receives characterization in the few lines of dialogue he had, through his magic, and his backstory. While Mars fought against Yuno, Klaus, and Mimosa, he referred to the others as pebbles to the wayside, and trivialized teamwork, saying that the weak are the first to go. He thought that having the weak on the battlefield was pointless, and so he fought alone, without Lotus. Much like the stones were embedded into Mars, so too was this ideology. The Diamond Kingdom treated their mages as less than human, forcing them to kill each other. Mars was conditioned to believe that he was an ultimate weapon of destruction. Lotus even refers to him as the Diamond Kingdom's secret weapon. Mars believed he was born to break everything. The cool thing about him is that his ideology is reflected in his magic. He made clones of himself out of crystal, reflecting his belief that he was the pinnacle of strength and that the weak should not be on the battlefield with him. Asta was the perfect antithesis to Mars. For one thing, he was purportedly the weakest out of everyone in the fight due to his lack of magic. Mars valued his vast amount of magic so much, so to have his opponent be Asta, the magicless peasant, made sense. Not only that though, Asta was also a great representation of teamwork, with his use of the Demon Dweller sword, another symbol of teamwork in this arc. He borrowed Noelle's magic and used it to aid him in bringing Mars down. And by the end of the arc, the dungeon begins to collapse, and Asta chose to save Mars. This is important because if Asta had accepted Mars' ideology, he'd say that Mars was just weak and deserved to die. He'd leave him to die there with no second thought. Mars would become a victim to his own mentality. After they open the way for Mars, Lotus helps him escape, and when he comes to, he has regained his memories and broken free from his old mentality that his past had enslaved him to. He thanks Lotus for saving him, and he seemingly comes to understand the value of teamwork.
Lotus. 助かった。感謝する。なんだ。そういうことちゃんと言えるじゃん。
The conclusion to this arc was beautiful. Throughout these 10 chapters, Asta changed the hearts of Luck, Klaus, and Mars. All three of them learned how valuable teamwork is, whether you're working with the weak teammates or strong ones. Another thing I noticed about this arc, and I don't know if it was intentional by Tabata, but Mars kept describing Asta, Noel, and Mimosa, and Klaus as pebbles or gravel. And maybe they were, but I think this lends itself to the idea of teamwork because a lot of gravel, a lot of pebbles, that can still be very harmful if there's a high amount of them. And I think this is just to illustrate that there can be strength in numbers, again, lending itself to the theme of teamwork. Yeah, I don't know if it's intentional by Tabata, but that's my interpretation of what Mars was saying. I really want to talk a little bit about Klaus in this arc too. In my eyes, he's one of the more underrated characters in Black Clover. When we first meet him in chapter 12, he's extremely disrespectful to Asta and Yuno too, simply because they are peasants. He really believes that status is entirely reflective of your power in this world, and that how much mana a person has is the only thing that matters. This is not only shown by his disrespect towards Asta and Yuno, but it's shown when the topic of Yami comes up. We see Klaus question Yami's choice to train physically, and throughout the course of the arc we see Klaus question the capability that peasants have. But when he sees Asta taking on Mars and learns that he has no magic, he can't understand how that could possibly be. After all, status and mana amount is everything to Klaus. He reconciles this contradiction by seeing that Asta is only strong because he lucked out into his abilities. But then he sees Asta's muscles and is in complete awe. He sees the value of physical training, and he sees Asta's drive to achieve his goal of becoming the Wizard King. This was not only great development to a character we had just met, it also foreshadowed how Klaus goes on to physically train later in the series. We see the results of this change in Klaus in the recent chapters, so I just wanted to highlight him here, because what Tabata did with him in this arc was amazing in my opinion at least. So I hope with this video, people begin to see the dungeon arc in a new light. It isn't talked about much, and there aren't a lot of Black Clover analysis videos on YouTube. But I hope I have successfully shown that it's a great first serious arc to the series. It's got some neat foreshadowing to something that isn't reintroduced into the story until chapter 265, Ultimate Magic. It introduces the conflict between the Clover and Diamond Kingdoms, and gives us a look at two recurring characters, Lotus and Mars, while sprinkling in some interesting things like how Lotus fought Yami and Julius. Things like that really make the world feel more alive. We get introduced to the Golden Dawn and see Klaus go from a stubborn noble to gaining a bit of respect for the peasants he despised so much at the beginning of the arc. And we get some classic shonen moments between Asta and Yuno. You can tell Tabata was putting a lot of thought into the series because teamwork is the perfect theme to kick off Black Clover with, because we now know 200 chapters later, it's a major theme in the broader narrative. This arc laid the groundwork for arcs like the Seabed Temple arc, where we had massive team fights against Veto, for example. We rarely get one-on-one fights even. Just look at the tournament arc, for example. It was the perfect arc to have a bunch of one-on-one fights, but Tabata opted to make it a team-based tournament with crystals as the objective. Part of this was likely due to time constraints because he had a lot of characters and didn't want to introduce all of them in a one-on-one fight, and a team-based tournament was more efficient. Still though, this theme of teamwork goes deeper, even seeped into the power system of the Black Clover world and the way magic attributes are able to interact with each other, as well as support mages like Finral and maybe even Zora and his trap magic. Tabata loves to have characters team up, and we can even see this happening now in the Spade arc with multiple people fighting each of the triads. It was just a really great choice for Tabata to push this theme and align characters like Luck and Klaus with it, because it's a theme central to Black Clover and Tabata knew that. Team fights are what Black Clover does so uniquely well, and I know I'm not alone in thinking that. I will say though that I wish the dungeon concept was more utilized. I feel like it was just used to give Asta and Yuno an excuse to find the Demon Dweller Sword in Bell. We really haven't heard or seen any dungeons since this concept was established, so it's a bit weird. Maybe we'll see a dungeon soon because Magna and Zora have been out of the story for so long. Perhaps they're at a dungeon and they're going to come back with a power-up that will enable them to fight the Dark Triad because they are peasants and they do need a little bit more, I think, so yeah. But that's about all I have for this analysis of the dungeon arc. I recommend everyone to go reread or rewatch it if it's been a while because it's a short but good arc with a lot to appreciate, and I can't even get to it all in this analysis. So yeah, thank you for watching. Comment your thoughts on this arc, I really do want to know, and remember to hit the like button and subscribe for more Black Clover videos moving forward. And yeah, take care.